After 256 games, we finally get to the ones that count. Playoffs? Playoffs, baby. Oh, hi, it's your old pal Dalby back for Wildcard Weekend in the NFL with my picks. Make sure that if you haven't subscribed already that you hit that big red button and hit the bell right next to it so that you never miss another video, whether it's NFL or anything else that's going to hit this channel. The regular season in the NFL is over, and it was a weird one. Gone are perennial favorites like the Green Bay Packers or the Seattle Seahawks. Gone are teams that you just sort of expect to be hanging around at this time of the year, like the Baltimore Ravens or the Denver Broncos. And in are teams that nobody 17 weeks ago, other than friends, family, maybe teammates, would have expected to be here, like the Buffalo Bills and the Jacksonville Jaguars. But just because it's weird doesn't mean that we didn't do some work with our picks this season. At the end of the road, I'm standing at 175 and 81, a 68% pick rate on my straight up picks. That's good for 6th out of 112 experts, people who are getting paid to do this sort of thing at NFLPickWatch.com. ESPN, CBS, Fox, anybody, call me, I got you next year. Now, it's one and done. Win or go home. It's the road to the Super Bowl, and everything is on the line. Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, New England, and Minnesota all get the week off to see who they're going to play next week. And we've got 4 games this week that we need to dive into to see who their opponents are going to be. So let's make some picks. First up, on Saturday, it's the Tennessee Titans in Kansas City to take on the Chiefs. The Titans can be proud that they handled their business and won their way into the playoffs with a big win against Jacksonville in Week 17, instead of needing help from other teams to make their way. Looking at you, Buffalo. So for Tennessee, last week was the start of the playoffs. It was win to get in, it was one and done, all the stuff we already mentioned. And they're in playoff form. They won. They did what they had to do to handle business. But the real story in this game is going to be the Jekyll and Hyde Kansas City Chiefs, who shocked the world in week number 1 by whomping the Patriots on national television. Then shocked the world again by diving into a slide where they lost 5 out of 6 games. Now, since the slide, they have gone 4-0, so it would seem that they found their form again. But there's just that air of doubt hanging over this team. When will they fall apart again? Will they fall apart again? Or can Alex Smith keep it together for 4 more weeks to get them into the Super Bowl? Now, I don't know anything about a ring for Kansas City, but we can talk about how they're going to do in Wildcard Weekend. And I think they can shut down this playoff run for the Titans. I think it's safe to assume that Kansas City should be able to shut down this Titans defense. Now, I mean that they've had some moments, including last week when it was all on the line, forcing 2 fumbles, getting 2 interceptions. But how are they going to be able to slow down this high-powered Kansas City offense long enough for Marcus Mariota to play catch-up? I think the Titans can be happy that they snapped a playoff drought. I think they can be happy that, again, they won their way in. But most spreads for this game are calling for -8.5 for Kansas City, and I like the Chiefs to win by 10, maybe even more, when they get really rolling here. Plus, a Chiefs win just sets up way more interesting matchups next week against either New England or Pittsburgh. Saturday night, we get the LA Rams hosting their first playoff game in LA since 1985. And just as a franchise playing in their first playoff game since 2004. They take on the defending NFC champions, the Atlanta Falcons. The Falcons needed a win in Week 17 against the Carolina team that just really couldn't convince anybody that they actually cared about the game that they were playing. And to me, that's really the story of Atlanta this entire season. Big wins against depleted teams, matching up against teams who are missing star players, getting lucky breaks along the way. Meanwhile, this season, Julio Jones, the target, the star offensive weapon for the Falcons, has been rather quiet. Only 3 touchdowns this season, his lowest number since 2013. His targets and his yards are better than they were last year, but he missed 2 games due to injury last year. So if you take that out, or at least assume that he would have passed those numbers with 2 extra games, this is also his worst season since 2013. Now, of course, a big part of that is Matt Ryan, who's also having a pretty off year statistically. His numbers this year are the worst they've been almost his entire NFL career. Meanwhile, you've got Jared Goff, who came out of nowhere to finish top 10 in the league in yards and top 5 in the league in touchdowns. Not to mention, Todd Gurley has run on everyone. The man is sitting second place for yards this season, and that's again only because he sat out a game. If he plays Week 17, first of all, who knows what happens against San Francisco, and secondly, he's your rushing leader this year. Both defenses can play, but the Rams are fully charged after essentially sitting sitting all their best players in Week 17. They're rested, they're ready, and I think that they are not done at the first round of the playoffs. Meanwhile, Atlanta just hasn't convinced me that they're actually good. Average spread for this game sees LA giving up 6.5. Give it up, no problem. On to Sunday, and two teams that zero people thought would be in this position. Seriously, if anybody's telling you they had preseason predictions of Jacksonville and Buffalo in the playoffs, demand to see some paperwork. It's the Buffalo Bills in with a huge assist from Cincinnati, getting a last-second win over Baltimore, taking on Jacksonville and the shocking Jaguars. Though I have to say, they were a lot more shocking 3 weeks ago. In Week 16, they got run over by the legend that is Jimmy Garoppolo. And in Week 17, with a chance to eliminate the Tennessee Titans from the playoffs, they just kind of rolled over, only mustering 10 points. What's the big difference between those games and all the other games that actually got them into the playoffs? 2 words: Blake Bortles. 5 combined interceptions in Week 16 and 17 killed any offensive opportunities that the Jaguars might have had in those games. Bad Bortles seems to be back, or at least was back for those 2 games, and that could be a death sentence for Jacksonville in these playoffs. See, when Bortles is in the Trent Dilfer role, where he's just handing the ball off, relying on the defense, and not making huge turnovers and mistakes to cost his team the game, he's actually a pretty serviceable quarterback. But when the game is in his hands, especially if he's playing a cover 2, which Buffalo kind of likes to play, that game tends to go out of his hands and into the hands of an opposing receiver headed back the other way. So the question becomes, does the Buffalo Bills have the chops to make this game all about Blake Bortles? Well, the Bills have given up the most rushing touchdowns of any team in the NFL this season, and that's not great news unless you're Leonard Fournette, the running back, the stud running back for the Jacksonville Jaguars. He has to be licking his chops right now. Buffalo defense is 6th in the league in picks, so that sounds great if they can force Bortles to throw, like I said, into that soft cover 2. They might be able to come up with a couple of snags. Make Blake throw, you got a chance. But I don't know if they can. And then there's Tyrod Taylor for Buffalo, the quarterback who's got to now slice and dice his way through one of the most dangerous secondaries in the league. This defense did struggle in the game against San Francisco, and they've shown some lapses over the last few weeks, and they are susceptible against the run at times. But Shady McCoy doesn't know if he's going to be playing after an ankle injury in Week 17. If he's out, it's all on Tyrod Taylor, which means guys like Aaron Donald are just going to be going for the ball. Not to mention going for Tyrod Taylor. The team is 2nd in the league in sacks. Average spread, -8.5 for Jacksonville, and I honestly think that this, based on the defense and the running game, could be a blowout. Blake Bortles can stay out of the way this week, and then we'll see about what happens next week. But I like Jacksonville to win by 10+. Ooh, this is a blowout kind of weekend. Finally, we end in the Big Easy, the Superdome, the home of a newly motivated New Orleans Saints, hosting Cam Newton and the Carolina Panthers. It was just 2 years ago the Cam and the Panthers went into Super Bowl 50 as 6-point favorites and left that game with nothing more than people questioning the heart and determination of Cam. This is supposed to be your star quarterback. This is supposed to be your franchise player, and he's making decisions that make it seem like maybe he's more worried about himself than the team, like he's playing more with his head than his heart. And honestly, since then, in the 2 seasons that have passed, can you really point to an effort or a game where you would say, oh, maybe that was wrong? Well, just last week, watching Carolina with a chance to eliminate division rivals Atlanta, knock them right out of the playoffs and get that momentum going forward, Cam looked like he would have rather been anywhere else. I mean, you're in the game. If you don't want to play, sit the starters, but if you're there, try and win the game, bud. Newton had no hustle, no spark, and seemingly no interest in being there. Again, Carolina didn't need to win that game, but they were playing their starters. Now try and imagine a game where Tom Brady doesn't need to win, but he's in the game. Is he giving up? Is he just going through the motions? What about Ben Roethlisberger? What about the guy on the other sideline, Drew Brees? These are all elite quarterbacks that play every down. Cam Newton, you can't say that about him. Speaking of Brees, he's just doing Drew Brees things this season. Number 1 in completions, number 4 in passing yards, you know, the usual. And the running game has been outstanding with Ingram and Kamara, the first rushing duo to each hit 1,500 yards in a season in NFL history. But the real surprising key to the success of the Saints this year has been a rediscovery of defense. Suddenly, this team remembers that defense isn't just a chance to give your offense a chance to sit down for 30 seconds. Suddenly, New Orleans is a team that's top 10 in limiting points points allowed, which is extra scary because, as I mentioned with that offense, they're number 4 in points gained. So we have an elite quarterback, a motivated team at home against a guy who maybe cares about being here or is maybe just worried about his next endorsement deal, and a team that just hasn't looked like they're a playoff caliber team really for more than 1-2 weeks at a time throughout the entire season. It's a pretty easy pick for me. I'm going to give up 6.5. I'm going to take the Saints. So if you're looking for the cheat sheet, it's real easy. Take the favorites this week. They're favorites for a reason, and that's usually how it works in Wildcard Weekend. Go with the Chiefs, go with the Rams, go with the Saints, and go with the Jaguars. Give up all the points on everything, and you should find your way to a little bit of extra cash when it's all said and done. And that's it for my Wildcard Weekend picks. Who do you got? It's only 4 games, so leave them all in the comments down below. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, make sure that you do that because we're coming back for the division games, the conference games, and of course, for the Super Bowl. I'm your old pal Dalby, and I'll see you at the next one.